Okay, so this is our third class on transactional analysis. And I always wonder, do people still use this? Is it still is it still being used? So I mean, it depends who you are as a therapist. But I told you today it's usually IFS. It's become like inter-family systems or something like that. They were developed one after the other. So Schwartz used the ideas here. He took it in his direction. In any case, what we want to do today is we want to move a little bit forward quickly, more quickly than I would have wanted to, but we have such a great parsha that it's impossible to hold back. What I want to do today is take a few more minutes to look at rituals versus what do we call the other one? No, ritual versus procedure. We had another name for it. Okay, procedure is fine. I don't remember if we had another name. Yeah, it's a procedure. And then I want to jump a little bit forward into games and scripts, because the parsha is so full of them that you just can't not do it. It's like it's begging to be described this way. Okay, so we're going to, for now on this page that I handed out, we're going to skip the script and game for a moment. And we're going to reread a little bit of an excerpt from Games People Play. And I sent you the EPUB. I don't know if anybody got a chance to download the app and open it or not. In any case. So what we saw last time is that transactions usually proceed in series. Right, I'm looking at the second set of paragraphs. These series are not random, but are programmed. So what he's saying here is that we learn these transactions from people. We don't usually make them up. If you do make them up, so that's something new, and he'll address it in a moment. But most of them, almost all of them, are learned. Programming may come from one of three sources: the parent, adult, or child. Or more generally, from society, material, he calls them social, material, or idiosyncratic. Okay, we haven't discussed parent, adult, or child yet, so we're going to do like a minute on it, even though this is at the crux of the whole theory, but we're not going to use it so much because it's a second level of analysis. So his idea is, we talked about this last time, that Byrne, his idea was that psychoanalysis is too complex. It's just nobody understands in the end what's going on. So he wanted everything to be very simple and clear. And he wanted to be able to communicate to his clients exactly what he was doing. So he said, I can't talk about the superego, ego, and id. And he basically made up three different names for them that people could relate to much more easily. So the superego is the parent. Okay, so he calls it a parent. And the ego is an adult. And the id is a child. Okay, so now it sort of makes sense, because the id is all the unconscious cravings that a person has. They're not refined in any way. They just burst out at any given moment. It's like a repertoire. It's a reservoir of a lot of psychic energy that wants to come out. Some people say psycho-cold to differentiate it from women in turbans that sit and read coffee cups. In any case, so the adult is the ego state that we take on when we're responsible, let's call it. Okay? And the parent ego state is when we're not responsible right now, we're not making decisions, we're rather passing down a tradition, or passing down what we were told as children is the right way to behave, the right way to think, the right way to whatever it is. So you can see why ritual and procedure would come from any one of these. So the ones that are idiosyncratic are the child procedures and rituals. Children can make up rituals. And I sort of touched upon this last time. I didn't get a real chance to talk about it, but one of my hobbies, I don't know if it's right or wrong to do it, one of my hobbies is to eavesdrop on Reform and conservative services on Yom Kippur. And you can easily do it because they don't even record it. I watch them live. So I'm assuming that they have a non-Jew who's doing it. But I don't know if it's true. But it's very interesting. Like you go into, you open up your phone at the end of Yom Kippur, you finished eating, you finished doing everything in it, and you want to see what happened in the world. And the first thing that pops up, if you go into YouTube because you wanted to see something, is these services are going on live somewhere in America. So, they're 7 hours behind or 10 hours behind, and you can watch. Most of the time, I didn't understand why, but I left with a feeling, sometimes I get emotional about it, and very positively emotional. Like that even people who don't know, who don't have any connection, so on, they want something on Yom Kippur. But almost all the times I also came away with an uneasy feeling that this is very childish. Like what they're doing is just childish. And I understand why, because they're adults doing something, and I could say, they could watch me and they could say the same thing, but somehow it didn't strike me as being equivalent. There's something different about it. And then this year it hit me because I had been studying, because they're making up the rituals. They don't have any tradition. They mamish have no tradition. They just make up whatever they want. So what does it look like? It looks like children playing a game. Like, it doesn't matter how serious they are.
But isn't conservative not as making up as reform?
I can hardly tell the difference. But yeah, you're probably right.
Is that today or
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that 20 years ago?
No, I watched this Motzei Yom Kippur. There was this woman. I mean, I can understand the limitations. The limitations are you have an audience who doesn't speak a word of Hebrew. And so my question is, why are you even doing anything in Hebrew? I don't get it. Like, halachically, there's no reason in the world to do anything in Hebrew if they don't understand Hebrew. So what is this? What are you trying to impart on them exactly? And so I understand. You're trying to make it look like a time-honored ancient ritual that's in some archaic language. But they don't get it. And you make it up anyway. So the whole thing, to me, looks like a game, like children just made this up. That's why I always tell non-Jews who want to do any kind of mitzvah, and especially maybe to converts also, you have to go, to feel good about yourself, about what you're doing, that this is serious, you have to take on the most archaic form of everything. Like that's where you'll feel comfortable. In other words, you have to look like me. Like if you don't, you'll feel that this is like it's something that's too ephemeral. It's like somebody made this up. But, we all, the famous joke, how do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu had a shtreimel? Nobody knows how you know? Because it says Vayelech Moshe, which means Moshe went. See, how could he go without a shtreimel? So of course he put it on. Right? That's the proof. But for the mind of the observant Jew, this actually makes some sense. That Avram must have looked like me. He definitely didn't look like a guy with a knit yarmulke. There's no way in the world. It can't be. First of all, because I used to wear a yarmulke and he didn't look like me. Anyway, it goes back to this thing that ritual is as good as it is old. And when you invent it, there's something that doesn't feel right about it. You have to go backwards as much as you can. It's a tradition. That's this idea. So the older the ritual is, the more value it has as a ritual.
Why if someone's far away, do they have to take on this most star form of...
Because otherwise they feel very, very self-conscious.
Well, I don't get the difference between the new kippah and the black kippah. And
because the more you are joining something that's ancient, the less self-consciousness you need. Like you're just doing what people have done for 1,000 years. That's the way you see it. And the more you feel like this is something we just made up, or someone just made up and I'm joining him, so you're very self-conscious because it's like a game. It's like a childish game. Like, what are you doing? You're not joining anything. You're sort of like playing a game. That's how you feel. That it's not serious. When it's not serious, you become very self-conscious. Yeah.
Maybe that's for men,
Okay.
but for women
Who don't have any ritual.
who, I mean, I don't see women fitting into the pattern you're talking about.
Well, there's a lot of rituals that women have. Like, for instance, what's this whole thing with the candles? Where did that come from? Who knows? Nobody knows what it means. Nobody really cares. The point is, you do this. So what's going on? I don't know. But this is how you do it. And if you don't do it, there's something wrong with it. It's not working.
But isn't that you're only supposed to look, that's for Shabbos candles, not for
For Yontif candles. I know, okay. There's all these explanations of why and how and who.
I never heard.
And why 2 candles and not 1, and everything
I
has...
never heard why. I did it because my mother did it. She did it because her grandmother did it.
So that's how it works. There's a million things in our lives. Wearing black and white, like for a guy, for women that wouldn't work, or usually won't work. For some women it does, but it's not black and white, it's something else. But for a man to wear every day the same thing is an unburdening of self-consciousness that we don't need. Like, I unburdened myself when I was 25, when I decided that I'm going to dress like a Lubavitcher. And I've never looked back for a second even, because I'm so light. My wardrobe is very simple. I can't even call it a wardrobe. And it's the same every day. And the whole thing, the whole joke is that, how do you know that it's not Shabbos? Because you don't have the pen in the, right? That's the only difference. It's all the same. So as I got older, so I have two surtuks, two hats. But what? It's liberating, right? It's unburdening. It's a big deal. I'm glad that women are willing to carry the burden, but if you don't have to, and that's what ritual is supposed to do. It's supposed to unburden your conscious decision making and make life easier. That's what it's meant to do, and it's meant to facilitate. That's the way that Byrne sees it. It's meant to all facilitate interaction, right? If you go into a Farbrengen, into a Chabad Farbrengen the first time, you run away. Like, what is this thing? This is like a group of people getting together to criticize one another and laugh at one another. What is this? And they drink. Like, what in the world is this? But it's about 200 years old, and if used properly, it works, and it's a very cohesive element in creating community if you use it the right way. If you don't know what it is, it's just troubling. It's like, why in the world do people do this? Or, we just finished a holiday that's so full of ritual, but this whole thing with taking the Arba Minim, walking around the Bima one time, and then on Hoshana Rabbah 7 times, and what in the world is that? What is that? But nobody cares. You don't care. In fact, the more you can say that it's minhag to do it this way and not that way, the easier it is. Like, we don't have to trouble ourselves with all these nagging questions about when do you start, why do you. It's all written. Everything's easy that way. So these are rituals, and society has them at any age that you're at, and in any society that you're in. Every society has to have them, because that's what unburdens us from consciously inventing our interactions every single time we have to interact. And nobody has strength for that. And again, even if we had strength for it, it would be unexpected. And that's where I'm coming to an observation that I think is really important, which is, why do, like in Freud's world, it's not so clear why you need the id. What good is the id? Well, the simple answer is that it's where all the psychical energy comes from. If you don't have an id, you're like a robot. There's nothing alive about you. But it's very hard to say exactly what that is.
And the id is not the animal soul?
It's like the animal soul. So in the Chassidus we'd say, so why do I need an animal soul? The animal soul is not exactly the same thing, but that's what people would tend to associate the id with. But when you use Burns' nomenclature, it's much, much better because he says this is the child ego state. Now, what are children good at? Well, they're terrible at ritual and they're terrible at following rules. What they're really good at is making up ritual and making up rules. And they make up as many rules as they want, and they're doing. And it has a name, and he has a name for it. And he says this is idiosyncrasy. The idiosyncratic mind. If you are entirely logical, or as he calls it here, material, or social. Material means, well, the adult state. Social is the parent state of the ego. Then you're boring. And you're as expected as can be. You're completely dependable that if I say this to you, you'll say this back. And it's good for stroking, but it gets to be a bore. And there are people that you can't stand because that's all they do. And you ask, is there anything behind this automaton? Does it actually think, breathe, care, laugh? What's going on? For that, you need the child ego state. If you don't have that, if you can't think idiosyncratically, if you can't act idiosyncratically, then in a certain sense, you've lost the ability to renew, to rejuvenate. So, my teacher, Rav Ginsburg, he is brilliant, but he is also idiosyncratic. It took me a long time to figure out what the name is. Like, he'll think about something, and he'll come up with an angle that you wouldn't come up in a million years with. You wouldn't get there ever, because he thinks like a child. It sounds like derogatory, but it's not derogatory at all. It's like saying that he's playing with it. He's not just learning it. He's learning it, and then he lets the child come out. And then he says, once I understood this properly, let's see what the child can do with it. And what the child does with it is much more interesting than what the adult does with it. Because what the adult does, you've already heard. If you haven't heard, it's as if you heard. You could predict what the adult is going to say. You could predict what the parent is going to say if you know where the person came from. But you can't predict the child.
Would you say like that helps a spiritual connection?
Of course.
Of course, right.
We connect
right.
when we're children.
Right.
In fact, he says here at point blank, he says, there is no intimacy without the child ego state. That's where you develop the intimacy. So I said we'd spend a minute on these, but we spend a little bit more, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, we'll spend a lot more on them because they're so interesting, the way he does this, and I think it's much clearer to look at ourselves this way and to see how we act this way in our interactions and with ourselves. In any case, from the present viewpoint, a ritual is a stereotyped series of simple complementary transactions programmed by external social forces. Right? So that's a ritual, but from the social. And informal rituals such as social leave-taking may be subject to considerable local variations in detail. This is where anthropology came from. Anthropology is the study of ritual. It's basically studying the parent ego state. Although the basic form remains the same, a formal ritual such as a Roman Catholic Mass, all the examples we gave, of course, offers much less option. The form of a ritual is parentally determined by tradition. But notice what he says here. But more recent parental influences may have similar but less stable effects in trivial instances. This is a sentence that needs to be unpacked. What do you mean? Recent parental influences may have similar but less stable effects in trivial instances. What's he talking about? It's like a loaded sentence that he didn't want to say what he was talking about, so he said it this. The page that I gave you.
Oh, it's the third paragraph.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
When was this written?
60s. Yeah. So what's he talking about? There's new rituals coming out, and these are parentally determined. They come from parents or parental influence, but they're less stable. In trivial instances, they don't have the same stability that you would expect a parental influence to have. What would be an example?
It's much more, what is the word, liberal.
down.
Okay.
There's more latitude for children. In fact, I think I'm not a parent and I can't really speak with authority, but there's a certain inversion where children have been given so much power.
So that's 30 years after he's talking. But in the 60s, what was this? Right, all these theories that started taking away from the traditional role of a parent. And so it said the parent has an influence. It's not that he or she doesn't have an influence. But if it's not critical to life, that's what he means by trivial instances. It means if it's not something that's critical, like for instance, don't play with a knife. I don't know, something like that. That's critical because you learn very quickly that it's critical. But things that are not critical, they're not going to cause you damage or harm, parental influence becomes less and less important. Not because, like what you said, inversion yet, but because the parents are no longer following a tradition. They're making it up as they go along. And when you do that, when you cut yourself off from tradition, children feel it. How do they feel it? Because they see that you're not even so predisposed to doing things that way. It's sort of like you made it up right now. And that's a huge issue. Like the biggest problem that a Baal Tshuva has is that they don't know the answer to a halachic question that the child, or a minhag that the child poses, and they make one up. If you don't know, I say, I don't know. I have to ask. But if you make one up, and then you can't back it, because when you do go to ask, or you quickly figure out that, wait a minute, this is not true. And so the children begin to understand that you're making it up also, so I can make it up too. And you lose the chain of tradition that way. So it was much easier. This is why our world is so complex, because it's impossible to know everything today. Nobody knows everything. So the first thing you need to learn to say is, I don't know. And you have to be able to say it and say, and I'll find out what we do, how we do it. So sometimes people say it the right way, and sometimes they don't want to feel so out of it, out of the loop, out of the tradition. So they make something up, and that's what starts causing problems. You have to be very careful. What I know. What I don't know, I don't know. But I'm very devoted to this tradition, and I'll find out. And I'll find and you need, and that's what I said about, I mentioned this about, you can't convert, I'll say it like in the negative, you cannot convert to modern orthodoxy. You can't become a Baal Tshuva to modern orthodoxy. It doesn't make any sense. Because modern orthodoxy says, I don't have a tradition, I'm modern. There's all kinds of possibilities. In the same way, you can't convert to conservative Judaism or Reform Judaism. And you can't become a Baal Tshuva to these either. Because it's a one-time event. It will never pass on to the next generation, because you're missing the whole traditional part. That's what I meant before, that if you want things to last, and the more you're in a state of making a tremendous change in your own life, and you want this to carry over to your descendants, you have to adopt something that is as heavy as an oak desk. That's what you need. You have to take that. Otherwise, it's not going to pass on. I mean, you may think it's passing on, but you'll see. And this is so common. And again, there's two reasons for it. One is because you don't have a tradition. The other one is because you fake it. You deign to have one. But both of them lead to the same result, which is that the children don't feel obligated towards some kind of tradition. And again, the obligation is not so much an obligation that's like a commitment that you make when you're older, and like an older person who comes into something does. For a child, it's just that there's certainty in the feeling that this is the way things are done. And these are really important points that he brings up, so I'm just taking a little bit too much time on them.
I would like to validate that. It's my son who just came to yeshiva. My youngest said,
within 2 weeks of being there, he said, "You know what, Mom?" He says, "No more do as I say, not as I do." He says, "That is like, there were times when I saw blah 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 parent do this or that, and they say not do it." He says, "No way." He says, "It's from inside and outside." Match it up. And I was like,
Chazal were very careful, the sages were very careful to validate every tradition, as long as it has a source. They would never say someone is doing something wrong. If you have your source, your authority, so fine. Halan ve'halahu. There was a famous thing that shows up in the Gemara in the Babylonian Talmud. It says, this is for us, this is for them. Them was the people in Eretz Yisrael at the time. So we have our tradition, they have theirs, and it's fine. And there's a whole chapter actually in Pesachim, in one of the tractates, that discusses how long you have to be in a certain place so that you are obligated to take on their traditions. And today we don't, and there's all these questions of what if there's a few communities there? This was still in the time when every community in one place had the same tradition. What happens when you have multiple communities in the same place? And then what happens? So it changes. But once there's a source for it, you validate it. The Rebbe spent a lot of time encouraging people to write down books of minhagim, basically saying, what do we do? Like how is it done in our tradition? Some formal rituals of special historical or anthropological interest have two phases. A phase in which transactions are carried on under rigid parental structure, and a phase of parental license, in which the child is allowed more or less complete transactional freedom, resulting, and he calls it here, in an orgy. Now, what does, unfortunately this has a very sexual connotation, this word, but I would, instead of using orgy, I probably should have changed it to a free-for-all. It turns into a free-for-all. Why is this so important? Why is he even mentioning this? And this is specifically of rituals of special historical or anthropological interest. The really important ones have two phases in their transmission, not in the. It's not in their development. They have two phases of transmission because you can't get a child truly aboard if you can't give them license to, within the tradition, do whatever they want. Within the tradition. You have to be able to entrust them with that ability, with that power. Otherwise, it's just authoritative. And that doesn't work either. Something will last if, on the one hand, we talked about this, it has a true source, it's been going on for long enough. But secondly, that it can be entrusted into the hands of even children who are not well versed in it yet, but that they can be given license to act how they want within this tradition. So what would be the example? The example is, and this is a mistake that a lot of parents make, like with davening. They have a 6-year-old kid, a 7-year-old kid, an 8-year-old, 12, 13, 14, 15. Today maybe it's up to 18, I don't know. And their tradition is, and it's a very good tradition, they take their child with them to shul on Shabbos. And then they micromanage them. Like, say this now, say this now, say this. What are they doing? They're making it impossible for the child to live the tradition. Instead, it's just become like a very heavy burden that you placed on me. You're not unburdening me, you're actually burdening me with all your micromanagement. That I don't want. So the smart thing is they have to come with you. Maybe they have to sit next to you, although I don't even stress that. I don't think it's so important. And then they do whatever they want. They want to say this, they don't want to say this, they want to say this fast, they want to say this slow. They're not interested at all. They're there to talk to their kids, go outside, and to their friends, go outside and talk to your friends. But you came. And so I have this framework that is traditional and you can't break it, but within that framework you have a lot of license to do whatever you want. Why? Because I don't believe that someone can pray by being forced to. It's meaningless. It's a meaningless exercise, and it's only going to cause them to reject the whole ritual in general. So the best ones are the ones where Or like the Shabbos table also. There's a ritual. We all sit down and you have to be here. I don't care what you do. You want to bring a book, bring a book. For me, at least, I don't care. If you find it interesting, so you'll put the book aside and you'll say it's much more interesting to listen to what's going on anyway. But there are some kids who don't want to. They're not interested. Okay, but you have to be here. So again, this is very astute and is. Many formal rituals started off as heavily contaminated through fairly efficient procedures, but as time passed and circumstances changed, they lost all procedural validity. I think we read about this. We read this last time when you guys gave me the example of the meat that you have to cut at both ends.
Oh, yeah.
So at first it was efficient because the oven was too small to put the whole piece of meat in. But now that the oven's big and your pan is big. Okay, in any case. So now we want to turn to games and scripts. So that was just a little bit more, and slowly taking us into the second level of analysis, which is the parent, adult, child's ego states. We're not going to talk about those really very much anymore today. What we want to do is, we said there are games, and we said the games are ways to structure a relationship. And games always have a thesis. So a game is, and we're going to see one game today. It's called See What You Made Me Do. Okay. And even you just hear the title, you already resonate. That's what's so beautiful with these things. That we're also familiar with it. See What You Made Me Do. Okay. I don't know if people still talk that way, but it right away resonates. So, yeah, see what you made me do. So, Noach is a see what you made me do type of guy. And when does this happen? When does Noach show us his game playing abilities, his strategy? At the end of the Noach story. So he survives the flood and he comes out, he's got flying colors, he brought everyone out and there's life again on earth and he brings the korban and he's done everything right, everything. And then you see this tremendous downfall, that he suddenly plants a vineyard and he makes himself wine and he gets drunk and he sits in his tent and Ham comes along and sees him naked and then Shem and Yefet come in and they cover him up, and then he realizes what Ham did and he curses him and he curses his son Canaan, and it's scary how telling this whole story is, because when you look at it just as a story and you don't recognize, I'm not saying that this is the only perspective on this story, but the moment you look at it from transactional analysis, it tells you so much more about Noach than you could find out in any other way, and it also explains why the Torah even gives us this whole story, why even let us know about this. Most of the games that people play before we analyze this game are part of a script. And the script is a lifetime script. Now, there's a whole question of how do you discover your script? So, in modern life, it's very hard to discover what the script is, although that's what, according to transactional analysis, that's one of the things that therapy is supposed to bring out. You're supposed to discover what your script is. Your script is very different than your shlichus. In fact, it's the opposite of your shlichus. That's what we're going to say. That shlichus is the only way to really break out of a script. Now, in transactional analysis, like in all psychoanalysis, the way that you break out of a script is you become aware of it. All you need to do is awareness, is consciousness of it. And consciousness alone, awareness alone, is going to help you break out, but we're going to say that it's not enough. You have to see life in a different light in order to be able to really break out of a script. It's not just enough to know that you're playing games that are part of a script. Okay? So let's read what he has to say about See What You Made Me Do. So the thesis, in its classical form, this is a marital game. So every game can be played in different configurations of players. But this one, he says, in general, is a marital game. and in fact is a 3-star marriage buster. Okay, that's what it does. 3 stars, like you got like 3 Michelin, whatever. It's the best of the best. But it may also be played between parents and children and in working life. So in every social interaction you can find this. The one we're interested in is, of course, the parents and children, because this is how Noach is going to play this. First degree, see what you made me do. So he's going to show 3 degrees of this. We're not going to be interested in the last 2. Maybe we'll read them, I don't know. But the first one is the one that's really most interesting, the first degree. So he uses names like White, Mr. White and Mrs. White. So anyway, White, feeling unsociable, becomes engrossed in some activity which tends to insulate him against people. Duh. Yeah. What? The only question to ask is, why is Noach unsociable? I wonder. He's the only guy who's 600 years old. Everybody else is 100 and less. He's got no one to talk to. Nobody understands what he went through. And imagine that, he lived 350 years after the flood. He lived 950 years altogether. So that's a lot of time. So a lot of people were born. I think when I turned 35, I started saying, it's not that I'm getting older, it's that there's a lot more younger people. So there's all these little children running around. Well, who's he going to talk to? Even if he was interested in being sociable, he's probably not going to be sociable. So he wants to be left alone. Basically, he wants to be left alone. And that's what he's resonating, that's what he's showing everybody. Like, leave me alone. I'm not interested anymore. Now, this is a problem because it's a script for him. Moshe Rabbeinu was also the oldest, but he didn't ever, not the same maybe gap, but still, he's the oldest, he's the most wise, he's the only one with God, and yet he never becomes unsociable. And the question is why? What's different about Moshe Rabbeinu? And I mentioned Moshe Rabbeinu because Moshe Rabbeinu is considered to be one of the main Gilgulim, the reincarnations of Noach. And in fact, he's the tikkun of Noach in many ways. The famous thing that the Rebbe brought was that in the Haftarah that we're going to read, in the selection from the prophets, we start with Ki mei Noach li. Mei Noach, the flood is called the waters of Noah. But if you take those same words, Mei Noach, and you just change them a little bit, the order a little bit, permute it, you get Mecheni, which is what Moshe Rabbeinu says. V'im ayin mecheni nami sifrecha. That if you don't want to forgive the people about building the golden calf and worshiping it, then strike me out of your book. Same words. Mei Noach and Mecheni. What did Mei Noach do? It struck everyone out, except for Noach. And Moshe Rabbeinu here flips the equation on its head. And he says, leave them and take me out. And we'll see that this is one of the keys to breaking the script. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was basically breaking Noach, the script that Noach lived with. We'll see the script later. But let's continue. So he becomes engrossed in some activity. He's making a vineyard. Nobody knows what he's doing in his tent. To insulate him against people. Perhaps all he wants at the moment is to be left alone. And that could be understandable. That's why he says this first degree. It doesn't have to be that this was what he did for 350 years, but I'm guessing that it was pretty close. So he didn't play it at the first degree, but we don't need more than first degree here. Perhaps all he wants is to be left alone, an intruder, who we will now call the persecutor. So we have the victim, who's the protagonist, that's Noach, and then there's the persecutor. At this level, he's not a prosecutor yet, he's a persecutor, and at this stage he's only an intruder. Such as his wife or one of his children comes either for stroking, they need attention, or to ask him for something like, where can I find the long-nosed pliers? Now, we all know this. We play all the roles in this game ourselves. So we're very familiar with it. This interruption causes, as it were, this is like the Freudian slip here. So causes his chisel, paintbrush, typewriter, or soldering iron to slip. So I have this, I'm sitting and writing, I have this thing which is you can't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence, because then I forget what I wanted to write, and then it takes me like a year and a day to figure out again what it was. So when people walk into my room, they can't start talking. Of course, this never holds, and people do it still. So why do I even say it? Because I want to be left alone. I don't care if you really interrupt me or not. That's not the issue. I don't care if I remember the sentence. I'm probably going to come up with a better sentence if you interrupt me anyway. And that's the truth. You're probably going to do it better after you're interrupted. But you want to be left alone. You want to be alone. As this is and whereupon he turns on the intruder in a rage and cries, "See what you made me do?" As this is repeated through the years, his family tends more and more to leave. So if he's like a professional player at this, so the family tends to leave him more and more alone when he is engrossed. Of course, it is not the intruder, but his own irritation which causes the slip. And he is only too happy when it occurs, since it gives him a lever for ejecting the visitor. Right? So you need the excuse. Or it's not just that this didn't cause any harm, but like I said, it actually improves what you're doing. And there's the famous story of Zusha and the Alter Rebbe sitting and learning together. The Alter Rebbe and the Malach, Rabbi Avram, the son of the Maggid of Mezrich, they were learning together Chavrusa. And Zusha comes by, and every couple of minutes he comes by and takes their candle out. So the first time they light it again, the second time they light it again. Finally, the third time he says, "Zusha, what do you want?" So he says, "I saw that you're so engrossed in what you're doing that you forgot the Eibishter. You forgot Hashem. Like you're learning your Torah, not Hashem's Torah."
Wow.
So that's like an example where you need the interruption in order to do something much better than the way. Being engrossed is not necessarily good. It's not always something that's good. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And some people know that it's better for them to be interrupted. In any case, unfortunately, this is a game which is only too easily learned by young children. To learn the game is to become conscious of it. The moment the children become conscious of it, they don't play it anymore. It's not interesting. If you would know, what do you mean? If I would be conscious of chess, I would never play it. Let me give you an example of a game that you're conscious of. Tic-tac-toe. Why doesn't anybody play tic-tac-toe? Because you can't win. Why can't you win? Because you're conscious of it. You understand everything that's going on. There's no way to win it. So if you know that there's no way to win in this game because they just want to be left alone, there's never going to be a situation in which I come into your room and you're engrossed and you're going to say, I was waiting to see you. And you'll get the stroke that you wanted, the attention that you wanted, the encouragement, whatever. It won't happen. So if that doesn't, now imagine a household where that does happen. Imagine a household where the father is engrossed in something and a child comes by and he suddenly notices them, and the thing that he does right away is he hugs and kisses them. Wow. Bang. Like, that's a guy who doesn't play the game. He doesn't need see what you made me do, because he understands the value of the interaction. He understands why they need the stroke. So the Rebbeim were like this. And once the Alter Rebbe chastised the Midler Rebbe for not noticing this. He was so engrossed. It wasn't even that he was being disturbed and he retaliated with, "See what you made me do." He was so engrossed that he didn't hear the cries of a child. He says that's not the way to be engrossed. To be really in your element means that I'm here to give. That's what it means to be in your element in Yiddishkeit. If you're not here to give, what are you doing here? This is for your self-betterment that you're learning Torah, or you're learning Torah to be able to teach? Or you're eating in order to be able to do a mitzvah? What are you doing here? She says, if you can not just not say, "See what you made me do," but if you can't even acknowledge the presence of someone who needs you, then everything you're doing is just wrong. You're playing the wrong game. You didn't get it yet. That's that story. It's a very powerful story. There it's like that the child fell from a crib or something even, and that's like, wow, what are you doing? Even though again you would say, wow, what in the Litvish world they would call what steigen, like he's so engrossed in his learning. That's a negative thing. It's not a positive thing at all, because what is this connection to Hashem leading to if you're missing out on helping someone? So again, children will easily learn this and not play, and then, okay, you're alone. But then there's a persecutor. What is it? This is already outside the game. Because there is someone who comes and tells you to your face, you don't care about us. The game proceeds fine as long as people are not conscious. It also works fine if you don't play it. But the worst thing is for someone to call your game. It's sort of like calling your bluff and saying, this is not about you being alone. This is about you dishonoring us or not caring about us. It's not about being alone. Everybody needs to be alone sometimes. You don't care about us. It's something completely different. And that's what Cham did. Cham, who walked in and saw his father's nakedness, what that means is he saw him for what he really was, which was a person who was in despair from the world and was not interested in contributing and doing any more. He wasn't interested in anything. He wasn't interested in passing down the rituals he knew. He wasn't interested in passing down the Torah he knew. He wasn't interested in anything. He was in despair. He was completely miyuash. Why? We'll see in a second, because that's his script. But that's what Cham did. I mean, again, I'm not saying that's what he did, because you can interpret it differently. But to see his nakedness is to call your game. And then you have the rescuers, Shem and Yefet, who are very docile, and they come in and say, no, it's not like that, leave him alone. You can't look at your father that way, you can't see him that way. Even if you know that this is what it is, even if you know that he's in despair, that he has given up on life, he's given up on humanity, he's given up, as we'll see, on the earth, don't treat him this way. And that's why he's like rescued by them. They give him another shot, like another opportunity to be something else. Because you always have to give someone an opportunity. Because even if they are in that game, even if they're playing it because they just want to be alone, there's always a chance for tshuva. There's always a chance to come out of that, to care again, to contribute again. And again, nobody contributed like Noach. So even if he'll never contribute again, he still did so much, you should still honor him. And that's what Shem and Yefet feel. And so they have a greater appreciation of the tradition that Noach is passing down, even if he can't continue to do it. And so that's why they continue the tradition, and Cham doesn't. But it's much more than that. If you will take it to the contemporary world, it's one of the scariest things. The persecutor is the person who, in a certain sense, also forces you to take stock. Like on the one hand, you can curse them the way that Noach did, but if you're serious, you have to listen to what they say, and you have to take to heart what they did. So it's very interesting that the sages say that he didn't just see his nakedness, they say he castrated him. Why did he castrate him? Because he's telling him this is exactly what your problem is. You're not interested in any future generations. You're not interested in playing a role in the world anymore. So it's the same thing. To tell him off or to physically castrate him is the same thing. It's telling Noach that what you're afraid of is being a contributing member of society. You're like out of the chain of ages, out of the chain of the generations. You like left. So it's like castration. You don't care. You're not going to play a positive role, constructive role in society anymore. So the persecutor is a very important figure if you take him the right way. We here in Eretz Yisrael have a persecutor. And this persecutor ain't going to give up. And he's already told us that he will continue to, if you think you are the eternal people, I'm the eternal vengeance persecutor, call it whatever you want. Why? Because I'm going to persecute you as long as you are not going to live up to your true duty in this world. And that's the wake-up call that the Arabs gave us. You have to understand this. This is like, we just want to be left alone. People take this verse that's supposed to be part of a blessing that Bilam said, that it's a nation who stands independently and does not take into consideration the other nations. What does that mean? That you, like Noach, you close yourself up in a tent and drink yourself to death? That's not what it means. It means that you are independent. You live off of your relationship with Hashem. It doesn't mean that you're not in contact with everyone. It doesn't mean that you're not here to influence. It doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you can divert yourself from your true role as an influencer. That's what you're supposed to be. And if you don't do it, we will persecute you. We will castrate you as many times as we need until you see it. And if people can't see this, there's a lot of people who see it now. But again, you can get angry at the persecutor, like Noach does, or you can also understand that the persecutor is saying something that's calling my bluff and telling me about where my game is really coming from. So we don't have a lot of time, so let's just see a script. In the Tanakh, it's easy to see the scripts because there's this whole saying from Reb Meir, Shma Kagarim. Shma Kagarim means the name is the cause. The name causes. So Noach's name, where did it come from? Because I'm saying it's easy in the Tanakh because almost everyone has a name that is telling of their script. Basically, all the names in the Tanakh are like that. The people who tried to mimic this, I only know this from American Indians. They have this thing that you even change the script from time to time. You change your name because maybe your script changed or something like that. But again, the script is what you're going to follow your whole life. It's very fatalistic in transactional analysis, but like we said, you have to break it. In any case, the script came from his father Lemech, who when he had Noach, and he named him Noah, saying three things. This one will provide us relief from our work and from the toil of our hands and out of the very soil which, I don't know why I didn't take this out. Now you have to return all the pages to me because you have to put them in Geniza. Placed under a curse. The very earth that God has cursed. Three things. From our work. What was the work they were doing that Noach solved for them? The work they were doing was that they didn't have a plow. It was very hard agricultural work. They became farmers, and they didn't have a plow yet. And Noach invented the plow. So Noach means Yenachamenu, provide us relief. You will console us. So he provided relief, meaning this is what he called him when he was born. Okay, so Noach knows I'm supposed to provide people with relief from, first of all, hard work, hard labor. And he did that very successfully. The second one, the translation is not so great. Umitzavon ma'aseinu. Itzavon ma'aseinu means, here they translate it as toil of our hands. Itzavon yadeinu, I think. What it really means is idolatry. What idolatry was there at that time? The idolatry that was at that time was the idolatry that caused the flood to come. And Noach provided relief from that. He did it. He played out the script. He built the ark. He did all the hard work that needed to be done. Now you understand why Hashem talked to him. Why didn't he talk to someone else? No one else was named Noach. No one else had in his script that you're going to provide relief from all the Hamas, idolatry, everything that's in the earth now, and that's causing the flood to come. So he's the one who knows. Hashem knows he can. Let's say the earth is going to be hit by an asteroid in a year. Okay? And all life is going to be wiped out. What will most people, nobody knows about this, but you have a dream and you see this. What would most people do? Absolutely nothing. Even if they knew. Because it's not part of their script. They don't see themselves as the saviors. They're not a savior. And I know that Hollywood likes to make a lot of movies about, inconspicuous people or just generic people who suddenly become saviors of who knows what. But it seldom happens. You can't make a hero out of someone who doesn't want to be a hero. And how do you want to be a hero? The only way to be a hero at the level of Noach, to build an ark for 120 years, to populate it with, figure out how to bring all the animals, do all that, is if you're somehow already predestined in your mind to do this. It's just that you didn't know exactly how you do it. Maybe you would save your community, maybe you would save the whole country. He gets to save the whole world. But he already knows that that's what he's going to do at some level. And so he's willing to commit to it. He's willing to take on the mantle of being the savior. Most people can't, because they don't have this in their script. Now, that's a big problem, because most people don't even have a script today. So if you don't even have any script, you certainly can't do anything. You just live from hand to mouth.
Why did it end though once?
So why doesn't he keep going?
Mm-hmm.
You saved us once, you relieved us once, you relieved us twice. Why not the third time? Because look at what his father Lamech says. And out of the very soil which Hashem has placed under a curse. You got to be careful what you say. Because he says no matter what, the earth is cursed. You will provide relief, but from an earth that's cursed all the time. So when do you finish? Never. That's why we said that Moshe Rabbeinu is the rectification of Noach's soul. Because he hasn't heard about this problem called there's no end game. In fact, that's his biggest test. That Hashem says, if you thought the end game was to reach the promised land, you're not going to. How does that change his actions, his behavior? Nothing. Not at all. We don't see him blink. Because he has a different script. What script did his mother give him when he was born? She saw that the house was full with light. And she called him, what did she call him? Vatera oto ki tovu. She called him tov, good. Good. Someone who's good, first of all you could say maybe it's a God syndrome. Could be. But like Hashem doesn't get tired. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get tired. That's his script. His script is it doesn't matter how many times they're going to have to redo this. They're going to test Hashem once, twice, 10 times. It doesn't matter. They're going to reject me 10 times. They're going to do everything they can. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is to keep doing good. Because that's what my life is about. So she gave him a script, and we're going to see that it's not really a script when we break down the script, hopefully, in one of the next classes. But she gives him a way to keep rejuvenating himself. Noach had no way to rejuvenate himself. The only thing he can do is he's going to find relief from the earth that God himself has cursed. Okay, the closest I can come to that is to drink. And that's why it says, Vayachel Noach Isha Adama. He's the man of the earth. What earth? The earth that God cursed. That's how he sees it. And he begins, Vayachel Noach Isha Adama means Noach, the man of the earth, began and he planted a vineyard. And then he made wine and he drank from it. Because that's the only relief he can find from a world, from an earth that's always cursed. Meaning, in other words, he's given up on humanity because he thinks he's going to have to do this again. And he was right, because he saw he saw the dispersion. He saw the Tower of Babylon. He saw that. He didn't know how it was going to end, but he imagined that this is going to end just as badly. In the end, it didn't end just as badly. It was also a flood, but a flood of language, something a little bit different. But again, this is like our first venture into this world of scripts and games. So
He's a castrated alcoholic for 350 years? Like that's...
So that the Torah doesn't tell us. You can see it as I'm guessing that if Ham came and persecuted him about it, wasn't a one-time thing. It was probably something that repeated at least for a few years. Okay. So it's now no surprise that alcoholism is the thing that this works the best with, because one of the best examples of a game in a script is Noach. Okay, so this was a tricky way to introduce us into this whole world of games and scripts. Okay. So we didn't get to the other parts. You can read this, the analysis at the end. I had to take up some words. But he has a partial analysis of what this is meant to do. Maybe we'll just read it for a second. The aim of this game is vindication. Meaning, what do you mean by vindication? Vindicate me. Let me be, is sort of like vindicate me. What was missing from Noach's life? Recognition. One of the things you could say that he was missing. He did everything right. You don't see that anybody recognizes him for what he did. And it could be that was what was missing. The hard form to rage based on, dynamically the mild form may be related to whatever, and the hard form to rage based on castration anxiety. It's amazing that he even wrote this. This is the other side, the last paragraph. It is easily acquired by children. The external psychological gain, avoidance of responsibility is prominent. That's what we said, that he's trying to avoid his responsibility as the one who provides relief. And the game is often precipitated by the threat of impending intimacy, since the justifiable anger offers a good excuse for avoiding intimate relations. And that's again ends up with castration. The existential position is I am blameless. And this needs to be explored more, this whole I am blameless. Again, the vindication is I did everything right. And yet the world constantly falls back into this decrepit state. Okay. Right, why? It needs to be checked. Need to check it.
The prosecution.
Persecutor. Yes.
They're bad? They're bad?
They're bad in Noach's eyes. But he's not. Ham didn't.
No,
Especially if all he did was see his nakedness. He's not bad. He's calling him out.
I have a question. So then, were the other two part of a disassociation? Like.
No, they knew
this is
also.
okay,
They knew. But I think that they said, leave him be. Because either he'll do tshuva, or for now he's done enough. Like, we have to recognize him for what he has done. He's provided relief, a lot of relief until now. Maybe the last years of his life he doesn't have strength to keep going. That's the way I see them. It could be that you can understand them differently. Certainly, I think this opens up a whole new dimension of reading the Torah, like one that it's really surprising when you, maybe not so surprising, but I think very telling.
like we're living it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Baruch Hashem.